Welcome to the 55th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show double nickels, 5-5, along with Scott D. Beck. Scott, dual meets are the answer. We just got done with the men's Division I national duels. I think this can translate over into something big for the women's side. Of course, we do have the national duels, the multi-divisional national duels in January, which I think is a fantastic event. I don't know why we have not figured out that this is the answer. We've continually said that women's wrestling is a different sport. It can go in its own lane, its own direction. Why not celebrate the dual meet concept in women's collegiate wrestling while it's a new sport, while it's a growing sport right now? I think it's brilliant that the University of Iowa has the For Her duels, that they have NAIA component. The best NAIA team at the For Her duels will wrestle the best NCAA team. I think it's perfect because you have the teams right there. John Smith and Dan Gable talked about it. That's how you build a fan base.
One, I've always loved dual meets, and I always say that you build your fan base based on your dual meets. Iowa University, when they're wrestling in Hawkeye Arena, you know, and there's 12,000, 13,000 people there, you know, they don't follow you to another event. Very seldom. You know, our biggest events are dual meets at our home institutions. I mean, that's the biggest event. That's where we grow our fan base. We don't grow our fan base at individual tournaments, we grow it with dual meets.
I mean, dual meets are obviously, you know, from our perspective, the lifeblood of the sport. And I guess we've gotten away from it a little bit. I think it's a funding issue. You know, people want to get matches, so they do the tournament format where you could have backups, or you can enter more athletes and get them matches. And I do think that's a big component of it. But, you know, and also I think, you know, certain teams, you know, they have massive local support and the duels are, you know, packed, and others don't. So I think it's a mixed bag, but clearly it's a great product when it's done. I mean, you and I talked about it. You were working. I watched a fairly good amount of the tournament this weekend. And, you know, it's really exciting that way. I think the athletes get into it. You see the teams, even these are men's teams, so they're not like cheerleader kind of type guys, but they're sitting on the side of the mat, both teams next to each other, cheering. It was very intense. You know, wrestling obviously was high level. Makes me realize just once again how much more I love freestyle than folk style. But, you know, as far as folk style goes, you know, this is as good as it gets, though. You know, when you watch the top teams, it would be nice if Penn State was there as well. But, yeah, it was a great event.
And conceptually, when you take a tournament where you could have a world level final or world level semifinal in round one, the loser doesn't get pulled back in. So you see that athlete wrestle one time, whereas in a dual format like this, you can lose your first match and it's not fatal. You're going to still see that athlete wrestle 4 different times. And you think even the junior duels, I like watching the junior duels better than Fargo because it's consistent. You can see the team right there. You can follow that team. Where you get Fargo, you're looking around, or Super 32, you're trying to figure out which mat they're on. There's so many mats happening all at the same time. That ability to just be able to lock in. We saw it a couple years ago where Amani Jones lost to Shelby Moore, but she was able to vindicate herself in the Iowa duel and win a big match over Felicity Taylor. So it's not fatal, and you get to see consistent high-level matches across the board. I just think it's such a wonderful formula. And it just even thinking back to earlier this year, North Central and McKendree, one of the best duels in the country. It's just at the Adrian duels, that should be lifted up and celebrated a little bit higher than what it was. And those things really can move the needle for the sport because you really can get behind it. And you're just looking around, you're pointing at your teammates, they're all right there. It's just such a beautiful concept.
It's great. I think we need to do more of it. I think we are moving in that direction. I think people realize that the lifeblood of the sport ultimately is the dual meet. Although tournaments are, you know, good and you get to see the high level wrestlers, but just the team aspect of it, I think it is important. And fans for sure can focus on a mat. You know, you have a couple of matches maybe, or, you know, the first round when you have a bunch of matches going on at the same time, the dual meet format can get lost. So you almost have to pick one and maybe two. Even in the semis, I kind of had to pick one, but I think it's easier for fans to follow. And it really is exciting because if you think about it, especially like, it's not just if you win or lose. In many cases, it's do you give up bonus points? Do you fight, giving up the tech or the major at the end and getting that 1 point by, even if you get tech to get a point in the match in freestyle. So it I think makes everything kind of matter and more relevant. And, I think we're finally starting to realize that as a community and trying to move back in the other direction, and you saw, in the interview about the men, it does help to have some money thrown at it. There was $1 million thrown at this event, by by a sponsor, and I think that clearly entices teams to to show up, except for Penn State, of course.
Think about that conceptually too, that the world record for a women's only wrestling event was the University of Iowa 2 years ago for the Trailblazer duels. That you have over 8,000 people, not the Olympics, not the World Championships. It's 4 dual meets happening simultaneously, 2 mats side by side. And part of it's the celebration that the University of Iowa had a wrestling team, but they also get consistent high-level engagement for their women's duels. And when you think about what's going to happen upcoming with Oklahoma State, some of these other duels, that's what you want to see. That's the infrastructure you want to have. And it reminded me too, because when they had the regional tournament in 2024, I thought Iowa might travel just down the road to Simpson College in Indianola, Iowa, and they just didn't show up. It was a small gymnasium. There wasn't a huge contingent. It just shows you when you can have it in Iowa City, it's right there. You have Carver Hawkeye Arena, it's going to bring fans in.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's just not, that is a wrestling community, that there's a few of them like that, but Iowa is kind of, wrestling country, Wrestle Town, USA, and the fans just show up. Ideally, we'd have others, but the pushback I got, when you talk about this is, what about when you promote this stuff? You have all these duels, the team travels, and you get 80 people. So it is incumbent upon the team that's hosting to create fanfare and make it an event. And schools on both the women's and the men's side, some are better than others. There's some schools that have built up followings. And then you get a lot of fans showing up, but you got to make it fun. You got to promote it, and it's difficult sometimes, and it's a process that I think takes place over time.
The college product is amazing because it really does feed into the team concept. Let's just go back to what we've talked about the last couple editions of the show, where we've said, do what's best for you. If you want to go for the world and Olympic titles, that's more of a singular mindset. That's more of, I want to win world and Olympic championships. Where do you feel like that fits in, Scott, as far as just doing what you want, but then you probably neglect and you miss some of that team support?
Well, I mean, I guess it comes down to, if doing what you want is that you want to go to college and you want to be part of a team, then you're all in on that. For some people, they're just not going to do it, in the bigger picture. I mean, I think it is a selfish sport, and it has to be. It's just the nature of it. And I think, though, you'll lose some. Some athletes just aren't going to do that. But the ones that do, I think, do embrace it, and I think they tend to enjoy. When you're preparing for a tournament too, it's like lonely. You're thinking in your head, even though they're ultimately in many cases, or team points kept, but it doesn't have that same dynamic. But I think it kind of takes some pressure. I mean, it can create pressure on an athlete where, you need to win a match for the team. But I think also just the banter and being in it with everybody kind of makes it more fun and probably takes some pressure off, I would say. And I've always, as an athlete, when I was doing it, I just always loved the dual meets, compared to the, tournaments.
There are currently 6 Division I women's wrestling programs, a couple of historic firsts. Lehigh had its first duel of the Division I era for the Mountain Hawks, defeated Lock Haven 26-15. Iowa wrestled Presbyterian on an aircraft carrier. I thought that was awesome. They defeated Presbyterian 35-9. And then the first Division I duel for Delaware State, Presbyterian won 40-6. But I think this is important, and how Iowa really set a great foundation for itself, and that how they developed, how they grew the program is that they said, we're going to establish a Division I program. We're going to hold off a year so Clarissa can recruit, and then we're going to dive into that first season, which was the 2023-24 season. They are now in their 3rd season right now. You look at a couple of these other programs, Delaware State announces, and then Coach Kenya Sloan is behind on the recruiting, so she gets during the summer, and so she really can't get recruits, and so she's just playing catch up during that time. and so she's behind. Lehigh was a little bit different because they had a club program, were able to get good recruits in, but they really didn't have that Division I designation until later, and then finally they had it. And now you see Lehigh has this massive recruiting haul. They had 6 big-time recruits coming in now. Now they're able to play the Division I game. And then Tarleton State with Jason Mormon, that's a championship coach that has championship capability. You're in your recruiting hotbed right now, but you don't know if it's a Division I designation. So you can't come into a recruit and say, we are D1. You can only sell hope and say it's going in that direction. And I guarantee you that that's going to hurt them on their recruiting front for right now. So really praise Iowa for the way they did it and the way they were able to just develop it over the course of time.
Yeah, I mean, I that is clearly probably the best way to do it, but I think they had the luxury of doing that in terms of, funding and money, behind it, as a Division I team. So I think that just almost solidifies, like, that you see that the landscape is very uneven, and maybe it's unfair, and different teams with more resource can do different things. And I also think that as the sport's evolving, and you and I have said this many times on multiple fronts, it's just so inconsistent, uncertain. The first few years are gonna just be like rocky like that. And I think so. Yeah, in a perfect world, they could recruit. So then maybe the first year is gonna be a little thinner. When they started, they didn't have that kind of heads up to build before. In terms of Lehigh, I mean, they had some hammer recruits. Krazer et al. And now they're getting more depth, but they had some big names, Jimenez. I mean, so it's. I think people knew it was going to happen, but yeah, now it's easier to get more recruits in, and I just think it's going to be very different for every team. This whole landscape is just going to be so uneven for the next 3 to 5 years, and God willing, we'll do one of these in 5 years, and it'll look very different. I promise you.
But what you're saying there, though, is that as much as McKendree has a good team right now, it's going to be next to impossible to overcome the giant that is Iowa. When you look at what just happened at the Blues Hose Open, they are 3 deep at 103. They are 3 deep at 110. Right now, it's Val Solorio. She's the front runner right now. Actually, absolutely put a stamp on it with a fall over Rhiann Murphy in the finals. Nyla Valencia hasn't even been the starter for the last 2 years because of injuries, and now she's pulling away. She looked fantastic at the Blue Hose Open. And so you have 2 returning national champions at 110 that might be on the sidelines, and you have 2 All-Americans because Val Solorio wasn't in the lineup last season because she was at 110. 2 All-Americans that might be on the sideline. So it just shows you the depth of what Iowa has, and so just their ability to navigate. You're looking for those guarantees. You're looking for Kennedy Blades guarantee. You're looking for Kylie Welker guarantee. Audrey Jimenez is as close to a guarantee at 110 as you're going to get. She's still the favorite for Lehigh. You're looking for those. Everest Leidecker, if she goes into the college scene, you're getting a guarantee with her. Aubrey Krazer is going to have some tough competition there at 131 with Lexi Janiak and some others. Cam Guerin, if she gets into the fold. But
Yeah.
you're looking at guaranteed points with Aubrey Krazer because she's good. So you're looking for those guaranteed recruits to come into your program. And when you're Division I, you hear it time and time again.
And also they have depth that if one of the kind of pseudo guaranteed people get injured, their backup is going to be very good. Now, the one thing that levels the playing field a little bit is the decision to only go with 10 in the NCAA tournament, right? Or so you can have. I mean, look, if you look top to bottom, McKendree's very solid. They may not have as much depth as Iowa, but on any given day, they have some hammers. They can compete, but it's just the room for error is very little. And over time, the ability to maybe you put together a banner year, whether it's a McKendree or Lehigh, you can compete, but it's going to be hard to do it year after year when you just have this depth coming in. At some point, you lost Kilty, you still have Welker and Blaze, but they're going to graduate. Who do you fill them with? Well, they have, good backups, but they're not like world medalists at the moment. So it's going to be hard to consistently compete against more significant resources. That's why you need some of these big names. You saw with Lehigh, hopefully Oklahoma State will. I mean, the more big name top, Power 4 schools with resources that commit, the more level it'll be. But, it's still going to be, Iowa's Iowa. And, you look on the men's side. I mean, Penn State's Penn State, Iowa's Iowa. I mean, these teams, they're just there year in, year out. Even Ohio State, like on the men's side, who looked great this weekend, just phenomenal. Have massively outperformed their rankings and just looked like a force. They're still been top five almost every year. Even though they're not one or two, they won the title one year, but they're always top five. So you're going to see that on the women's side, that the schools with resources and commitment are always going to be up there. And any given year, maybe you can get a random situation, but it's not going to be that surprising because you're normally going to win.
And it goes back to the topic we have talked about where the NAI is getting quality wrestlers to come into their program. You look at William Penn, they have Olympians in there, they have top recruits, Life University, of course. You look at their lineup top to bottom, you have some quality wrestlers that have made an impact. Providence, Indiana Tech, you just have some of these programs, Grandview, that have shown that they can compete on the recruiting front. If they want to go D1, you can say you're going to come here and we have 12 opportunities for you. You might be one of the two that gets on there. I think that's a great selling point. So it still is, even though it looks like NCAA is pulling away a little bit, you still have the NAI with some real staying power there.
Yeah, for sure. And they have a tradition of, on the women's side of being, very good, and I think they're going to continue to be that way. And I think a lot of the athletes, but they may not have the depth or be as good, but I think at the top end, they're very good. The question is going to be, in a whole team, can you have that depth? And, with the biggest names, once you can, have a bunch of Power Four schools. So it's going to evolve. It's going to take time, but, it's going to get more difficult to compete, just like you see in the men's side. But I think the gap will widen over time. But it's going to take more time, I think.
It will, and then don't forget Grand Valley State, a Division II program that is in its second season with Jake Short and what he's doing and his ability to connect and get quality recruits in. Of course, at some point, we're expecting that North Central, one of the powerhouse programs, will be splitting off because every indication is that Division III is going to be splitting from Division I and II. So you're going to look at two different products in the NCAA and then the NAIA. And then even junior college has some quality wrestlers in there, some age level world medalists consistently going into junior college. So women's wrestling space is so fun to watch because it is spread out and you don't know where they're going to go, or even just go individual, like in a Meet Elor saying, I just want to stand alone. I want to just go for the Olympic and Worlds. It's just everything's unique. Or the club system. You have Oklahoma State as a club, Brown as a club. So you just have 5-6 different lanes for these girls to go down.
Yeah, and I think it's one hand, it's very good that you have all these different options. You don't have to go in a box like the men tend to do for the most part. On the other hand, it can be very confusing, and that's, hopefully we can continue to discuss these things. And I think, back to Jake Short, I talked to him at the Bill Farrell, and, and then Mikhail and I were talking, it's a very interesting concept that you say, like, why would somebody go to Grand Valley State? But I think, it really is. People go in many cases. What sells, it can be the school, it can be the money, but I think it's really the bond in many cases with the coach. And there's a lot of athletes that really want that commitment, that personal connection to the coach who they feel has their back, really understands them as a wrestler, is going to work on their weaknesses, work with them to develop. And that really means a lot. And some people forego, I don't care if I'm on the quote, best team or my team's winning. But you have some athletes that want to go to a place where they really feel they have the commitment of the coach to take them to the next level and are willing to forego, quote, having the best team.
How about this? Over the weekend, I don't know that if this has ever happened before in the history of college wrestling. You had a husband and wife competing at the same time in college. I think it happened at the U.S. Open World Team Trials with the Gross family. You had Rana and Seth Gross. I think this is the first time two college tournaments had husband and wife competing simultaneously. That was Paige Moore, formerly Paige Warmeister, and Spencer Moore. Paige wrestles for Presbyterian. She wrestled unattached, even though she's still in college, but it was a college tournament, the Blue Hose. And then Spencer Moore wrestles for Illinois. He wrestled at the National Duels. I would imagine, since you're not probably getting married in college that often and you're both wrestling at the same time, that it's going to happen, but kind of a cool thing that happened there.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I'm sure that has not been done before, but you never know. There's always some weird stuff in the wrestling annals, but I doubt it.
And then how about Wyoming Seminary? Freestyle only. That's the concept of what they want to do. That's what they push is freestyle. They go into the Wilkes Open and really just show that high schoolers can compete. I'm not saying it's the highest level college tournament out there, but you look at some of the results, it's pretty remarkable. Jacqueline Bazakis first at 103, Maddie Healy and Brooklyn Henry first and second at 110. Anastasia Rodnikova first at 131, double forfeit at 160, and then Alex Penley third at 160. It's pretty amazing what they're able to do as high schoolers to go in and compete against college girls. I think it says a lot for what Wyoming Seminary has been able to do and build there.
Yeah, I mean they've consistently had a mission and have stayed with it, and the athletes have done great. I mean they have a team of all stars pretty much. I noticed this also in the men's tournament this weekend where it's not like a one-off situation anymore where you have some high school people beating college people or just beating great seniors. It's really just says to the development of the sport where you have these private coaches, you have videos, you have club system. By the time these athletes are juniors, seniors in high school, I mean they're hammers. The really top ones, can go with some of the best, seniors, and it's really unbelievable on both the men's side and clearly on the women's side as well. And it used to be more of a rarity, and now it's happening all the time and consistently.